Woohoo! It's spooky times. Happy Halloween to everyone who's listening in today to the Revenue Circus podcast. I'm Clara. I'm one of the co-hosts, also AE at Unium. And with me today, I have MC, AE at Dream Data. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here with the
Yes.
ears.
Halloween themed. Thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. So I'm MC and I'm AE at Dream Data. But also I'm a mum, I'm a creator, I am a community host, a lot of different things. So hopefully I can.
I know. And we need to dive into that in a moment because you have a very interesting background. And I also love that you founded Saleswoman Unite.
Yeah.
But it's Halloween, it's a bit of a spooky times, and we are going to talk about the spooky topic, the buying journey that's getting longer and longer and more complex. It's more competitive than ever, I think, in B2B SaaS. More stakeholders are involved in the process. Not only, I would argue, on the enterprise deals, also on the mid-market deals, and also buyers want to spend less time with sellers. So I think we will dive in a little bit today on how we can sort of navigate those twists and turns, aligning the stakeholders, avoid deal fatigue. So I'm so much looking forward to dive into this together with you. And I know this is one of the reasons I wanted to invite you because you work at Dream Data. Part of the topic, basically. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do at Dream Data?
Yeah, so one thing that we do, I suppose, at Dream Data is that we have the data at our fingertips to actually understand the customer journey. And you were mentioning, Clara, that deals are getting longer, and it's not just the enterprise segment; it can even be kind of that SMB segment as well. Yeah. And we see this kind of increase through our data as well. So on average, the customer journey, B2B customer journey, is around 192 days, and that increases by 40% if you're going then up to enterprise. And we're actually consolidating all of your data from kind of your go-to-market tech stack so that you can understand this customer journey.
Yeah, I'm looking forward because I know we're gonna start with this at Unium because I'm more like, oh, this popped into my pipe. I have no clue what's been happening sort of before that. So super interesting. I'm also like, I want to basically move to Copenhagen when I saw that you have founded Saleswoman Unite. You shared some stats the other day. This is for another topic, another episode, but only 26% in tech and SaaS are women. It's
but that's very much improved from a few years back. So there is a change happening. So that's really, really, really positive. But I founded Saleswoman Unite basically to empower women to understand that women aren't alone in this role, being in sales, and to, of course, build a community where we can help each other and also understand the complexities of the buying journey and ask people for help as well. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I love that. But I get to Sweden as well.
Yes. Yeah, we're not that far away, just a little bit across the bridge, right? So
exactly. But can you tell me a little bit, just before we dive into all the topics, like what made you pivot into sales? Because I know you spent many years in the entertainment industry. What was sort of
So actually, I spent the majority of my life being a ballet dancer. It's a very, very bizarre career to go from straight into sales. But I also became a mother. I had my second child. It was COVID, and all theatres then shut down. So it was just, of course, then a natural kind of progression to look for something else.
Yeah.
I had been in the the theatre industry for so long that I wanted to also experience new things. And a lot of kind of the traits that I adopted from being in the theatre actually help in kind of this sales environment. And, you know, I've been told no so many times in my life, or oh, I'm not good enough, you know, or something. So selling then to mid-market enterprise, you know, customers, then it's, you know, you hear those kind of things all the time, and then you build a thick skin.
Yeah.
I
love that, but it's such an interesting pivot. But if we're gonna start to zoom in a little bit on the buying journey, I mean, I think we all see, I can feel like you think you are at the end of the tunnel, but then it's something else coming up, and it's like, it's never ending sometimes. But if we look at sort of the pipeline entry of things, as I had mentioned before, like the buying journey is starting way before. How can you sort of spot early buying signals in the sales process?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it's a lot of the time where, you know, sometimes we get these things wrong, and it's a learning also. So in my role myself, I've learned a lot. I came from being a BDR initially in my sales career, and I think the world has changed a lot as well, especially with the increase in AI and all of this. We can go into that as another subject as well. But I think there has been for many years this focus on signals and signal selling, but now it becomes even more important. And I think that's where you can identify using these signals, either through dream data, or it could even be Sixth Sense, demand-based, whatever kind of intent platform you're using. And you can identify when a lead is actually ready to talk to sales. And this is not downloading an ebook. So sales, I'm telling you now, if it's just a download of an ebook, do not reach out to that person. But you can use it. So for instance, with Dream Data, we get kind of LinkedIn ad impression data, we get G2 intent data coming in, and we also have website intent as well. So if you see an account looking and viewing your pricing page, viewing your integrations page, going to 3 or 4 webinars, I mean, that shows some pretty high level of intent. So it's kind of understanding when they're ready. And I think that's also one thing that we see through our data, that this kind of consideration stage or research stage is much, much longer, which means you have more data points at your fingertips as well. I'm super excited that at Unium you're also getting started with this, and it's helped me as well with my outreach, especially with the website analytics. You can understand what content they're interested in. You can then ping them really a nice kind of soft approach, even on LinkedIn, on DMs, whatever, and that usually goes down really, really well.
Because it's also like a fine balance, you know. I have a few accounts I'm working with. They've been in so many webinars, but I still feel like they're not ready. I've been burning myself a few times. Like you go in too early and, you know, try to, you know, come and, you know, get a demo with me. And so it's, but it's very good to have all of those sort of signals, understand more when you're gonna, you know.
And maybe that's something to also understand within your organization. Like, what is an MQL for your organization? When is it okay for sales to reach out? And that is also a discussion to have internally, I think, as well. But definitely my advice, don't reach out to people too early, and never kind of pitch slap straight away. Try and make a relationship with them. Of course, inevitably, they know you're a salesperson, but, you know, it's definitely, and I think this is where we're moving into, is this kind of relationship building, especially with the increase of AI and automated outreach. People don't want this. You know, they want to bring the human back to these sales processes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Things are definitely changing. You need to be on your toes and do the right things at the right moment, which is not always super easy.
No.
One thing that I find challenging from time to time in the sales process is still sort of aligning the stakeholders. And I think
Yeah.
I see, like, I sell a lot towards mid-market, and I had another podcast, one of the first one I did throughout Artist Circus, and we talked about this, like, it's almost as many stakeholders in the mid-market as
Mm.
enterprise. Like,
Mm.
do you have any sort of tips and tricks how you sort of align the stakeholders? Because I feel like there's so many stakeholders, everybody has
Yeah.
different priorities. Like, what is your go-to when you work with aligning the stakeholders?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to understand your ICP inside out. And of course, different stakeholders have different needs.
Yeah.
So if you're speaking to someone in operations, then of course you need to have more of a technical discussion. If you're talking to someone kind of more of commercial side, then you have to tailor kind of the needs based on their role, based on their objectives, and kind of what's important for them to succeed in their job, right? That being said, I think it's really, really important to understand who your champion is as well. But I have seen from working quite a few enterprise and mid-market deals, is that champion can also change throughout the process.
Yeah.
So also being open to that kind of change as well.
Yeah. We actually had a case where after they signed with us, the initial person we thought were the champion was actually routing for another vendor. So sometimes it's like
Yes, yeah.
kind of hard to get. But also, like, I think I try to sort of map out the stakeholders as well. But what
Yeah.
I find challenging sometimes is that I had an ongoing process, which I hope gets signed today. Spooky times, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But we had a big demo in their office.
Mm.
There were a few stakeholders with titles that I would never even map out, but
No.
they were so involved in the billing process. I had no clue. Has that ever happened to you, that certain people come in that you were like a bit blindsided, like you would never
Yeah.
thought that they would be sort of involved in the process?
Yeah, I've had both sides, right? So I've had people coming into a process, and we see it more and more and more now, especially when budgets are tightened, when perhaps more people need to be in agreement internally to purchase new tools. We've seen more and more that CFOs are involved, CEOs are involved, and those are generally people that we're not talking to. We're usually speaking to CMOs and marketing operations with Dream Data. So we have seen this shift, and I think that's just kind of the climate, unfortunately, that we're living in today. But that also means that it's our job to understand what's important for them and tailor your pitch or the conversation to really hit their needs as well. And that's where it gets complex.
Yeah.
But saying that, I also sell to marketeers. I've had my champion, someone that's rooting for the solution internally, to then move on.
Yeah.
We all know that it's a big turnaround in sales and marketing, but I've actually had it mid-process before, or even right at the end, like weeks before signature, when my champion has suddenly left to, greener pastures, or, whatever happens. It is business at the end of the day. So that can also derail kind of the process.
Yeah. Well. Did you see the question from Kara? It was a little bit.
Yes.
And talking stakeholders, what do you do when your main POC all of a sudden is not part of the deal anymore? That is.
Yeah, and I think this is where it gets really important to map out each person involved in the deal, to understand their roles, to understand if this should happen, who do I reach out to? Who's my next point of contact, so to speak? But also, what I'm learning more and more is to ask the really, really hard questions first. Ask kind of, what's going on in the business, like why do you need a solution like this? Because people then open up, and maybe there has been restructure internally, maybe there is kind of uncertainty within the business, for instance, where you can actually mitigate those things, or at least you are aware of those things happening.
Yeah. And that's something I'm actually in sort of the progress. You might already doing this, but also if you want to sort of bulletproof, I'm in the process of starting to actually do, Nate Nassarella, he's talking a lot about like,
oh yeah, I love him. I follow him. Yeah.
because I've been working a lot with like mutual action plans, but I also felt like it's a piece of the puzzle that is missing, and that is actually craft a very compelling business case. And I think like it also ties a little bit back to Kara's question, that also speaks with the wider organization, not only your main stakeholder. And I think that is something that's very powerful that could help throughout the sales process as well, especially if a key person is moving companies, and that can happen and derail.
Definitely, and it becomes more sticky then, the whole organization, I mean, they don't have to be involved, but then they at least know your value proposition. They know why this solution will help the whole entire organization, rather than just said one person. I have had deals where that works when I've only had one person involved, but that rarely happens. Usually you're speaking to 5, 6 people, then procurement comes in, then security, then, and then you're speaking to, it could be, 10, 11 people, if not more. So of course you need to understand kind of each role and what it plays within the buying journey as well.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, I always talk with the CFOs, and I know that's the decision maker, but it's still so many other pieces of the puzzle. We're going to integrate with, HubSpot or Salesforce, and then we have our own platform, and the CTO comes in, and the CEO comes in. CEO can be so many stakeholders. So I feel like that's something I think can help sort of align wider in the organization, but also if someone will leave.
Especially your champion. You want to make sure that you almost make mini champions in other kind of departments as well. And I think that's where it helps to have this kind of community kind of mindset. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I like to think of it with everything that you do, you're reaching out to kind of the wider organization, you're kind of planting seeds, you're planting your value proposition. And that can be through any activities you're doing. So I know, Clara, you're also doing a lot of social selling. We're also doing that in Dream Data. So
you're amazing at it. Like I think it was you or Laura who shared the stats. I was like, God, that's many impressions.
So just making sure that you're reaching your your stakeholders on different levels, and I think that's where kind of marketing and sales blending comes in as well, because staying in touch with these mid-market enterprise deals, staying in touch with everyone, it can get really difficult. But if you're doing social selling, you're reaching out, make sure you always connect with those stakeholders in that organization, and that can be part of your strategy as well. We also run a lot of events, so that's a nice thing to kind of keep the ball rolling, so to speak.
Yeah, but I do agree. And I think like with LinkedIn, that sense of community and really educate your buyers on a wider spread is amazing. And also, get them a little glimpse of you as well. I saw one of your posts with the avocado toast, the morning with the kids, getting them to school. I love that. It's so relatable.
And I think I've actually seen it personally myself, helping to kind of smooth the first discussions. But then also people saying, oh, I saw your post about that. Can we go into that use case? We hadn't thought about that, for instance. And, you can actually open up a conversation to make kind of your solution more sticky internally as well.
But that's amazing. I'm going to move on to another topic that is always a challenging one. Like a shift of priorities. I mean, it happens. You worked on a
Yeah.
deal for X amount of months, and now we're shifting priorities mid in the process. You maybe add in a lot of time going through the use cases, having several demos. Like, how do you sort of navigate that?
Yeah,
Shift
it's
and
super tough,
yeah,
like super tough. And I think you can try, of course, to understand why this priority shift has happened. You can understand their new priorities, but in essence, if if a company changes, if they restructure, I've learned kind of over the years also, and speaking to other salespeople, it's just patience. Like at some point, they will come back. They will, of course, look into your solution again, but maybe the timing is just not right then. Okay. And that's really, really hard to kind of swallow as a salesperson, especially if you've gone through a long process already.
yeah,
But that being said, you could also kind of shift your value proposition. If something has been a priority to them before and is not now, kind of understand why. Also, readdress kind of the return of investment, like what it means. Also, I would say kind of the cost of inaction could be
yeah,
a nice way to kind of position your product as well. So if you actually don't purchase our solution, say Dream Data, it could be that you are losing out on this amount of money. And I think that's a nice way to kind of spin it.
yeah. And I always try to do a little bit of soul searching when this happened. Have
Yeah.
I really digged
Deep.
deep, or is it like a nice to have, or have I even gotten to the need behind the need? Because I think like
Yeah.
I burn myself in some processes where I'm like, okay, I haven't really gone
I
to
think we
deep.
all have. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like also the discovery part, it's like ongoing. I'm kind of frenetic. I'm like, what's happened since last time we spoke? Always.
Mhm.
That's my like first cue in every
Yeah.
call. But I think like also keep on digging. It's not only like the first
No.
initial call. Like there's more to sort of dig into throughout the process. But
Yeah.
sometimes you tend to sort of forget to
Mm. And I
dig.
think if you do that throughout your process, you're then more aware of what's going on internally, and also I forgot to mention before, but like bringing in all of those stakeholders, always follow up with everyone, but also single thread as well.
Yeah.
So you can get an understanding of what's going on internally, and if there is a shift of priorities, what are the reasons behind that shift? Why then is your solution maybe not a priority? And understand where that fits in to a timeline process, because it could be that they still really interested in your product, but it's going to be in 6 months time.
Yeah.
Or it could be that they say, oh no, it's actually for next quarter, and then you have an understanding then of when it fits in.
But I think like that's one of the biggest challenges I have. Like they need to go into kind of a big implementation in some
Mm.
cases. And that is like when we have gone through kind of a long process, they're like, we have limited resources. We cannot do
Yeah.
this at the moment. That is like one of the toughest one to actually tackle. Like you can go back to cost of inaction. They will always be busy, but it's
Yeah.
that one is, for me, it's a big roadblock sometimes, like to sort of overcome
Yeah.
that. Because you also want the implementation to be a good
Yeah.
experience, that they have time and effort to put into it.
Yeah. And I think that's also that the earlier on you understand their resources internally, but also
Yeah,
communicate how many resources it will take to implement your product, who usually is involved in that implementation process. So you were mentioning kind of CRM admin, HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. We have the same thing, but I think it's good to communicate that during that sales process as well, so they have an understanding, what's required from their side, and it doesn't come as a kind of shock really late in the process.
yeah. One thing I've been feeling has worked well for me as well is like when you choose the communication channels, I
Yeah.
started to try to like text kind of early in the process, just
Hmm.
getting into text messaging. And
Really, I haven't used that yet.
no, I feel
Actually,
like that's actually, it's not nothing like revolutionary, but I feel like
no.
you take this you know, very business level down a notch to just
Yeah.
start to text. So that's been, maybe you should try it out. I feel like that's something that could work with CMOs.
Yeah, it could be. We use kind of Slack during our sales
Yes.
processes. Sometimes that works really, really nicely. I also message on LinkedIn a lot of the time. Usually it's more kind of just kind of checking in, sharing webinars, LinkedIn Lives like this one, for instance. But I would say, yeah, try different channels. Experiment. I'm going to take the tip of text messages. I actually worked with quite a big Israeli company, and they are on WhatsApp all the time. They're like, we need to do WhatsApp. Okay.
Like, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, so maybe that's also a nice question to ask. Like,
Yeah.
what's your preferred communication channel? And I'll use that. Like, not everyone wants to use email. And usually emails get lost. Like, we all know that in sales, right? So, you know, keeping top of mind on the communication channel that they would like to use. So
We have kind of a long question.
wow.
So
Yeah.
can you see it as well? I read it out loud, and then so it was very directed to you. Okay. Would love to hear your thoughts on the sales enablement collateral to support reps and any trends you're seeing that can help momentum with the prospects.
Yeah. So in terms of sales enablement collateral, I mean, I would love you to kind of expand on that as well. So we always have kind of our sales deck. We have a sales playbook. This is something that is kind of always kind of a work in progress.
Yeah.
So we always have kind of a shared one as well. We're a relatively kind of lean sales team. So we do have kind of our own way of doing it as well, but we do also work closely together. So if I've had like colleagues send a kick-ass sales deck, you know, they will share it, and we'll do that on Slack and share things that work. And in terms of like keeping momentum, for me, what helps is kind of this cross-channel approach, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, email, making sure that you really kind of tailor your messages to those individual roles. I think that can really, really help. And, you know, your marketing team also are doing so much work generally. And I feel like sometimes salespeople just kind of dismiss that they're doing this, or we're just kind of siloed into our own
kind of that sometimes. I'm like, do we have all of this?
Yeah, exactly. So just like go into the blogs, share those. Like it's so simple, but sometimes it's so neglected.
Yeah. But we're also like kind of a lean sales team, and we have the customer acquisition playbook on Notion. You can fill in like if you have a competitive case, we just go into it. But I think like we're also kind of like everybody's selling kind of widely different, but I also see that as a strength. Everybody has something to pick up from the other.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of also making sure that you have documented everything, and I think this is where in general salespeople hate doing this, but it can help the whole organization to understand why deals move forward, why they don't. So we always have kind of a pre-qualification form. Then we afterwards have kind of after the kind of qualification, we of course write down all about their tech stack, their needs, and what's important for that company to move forwards, their use cases. And I think this is where we've kind of tailored our sales approach of kind of helping our prospects. So I know there's a lot of sales methodologies. Think of BANT, MEDPIC, MEDIC, whatever the names. But generally they're tailored, and maybe this is just my viewpoint, I feel like they're tailored to help the buyer, to the salesperson, not the buyer. And I think this is where we can craft as salespeople better use cases. We can understand their needs a little bit more. And like you said, Clara, before, like dig a little bit deeper. So you have the surface level pain, but like go down a little bit more into actually why that is a pain right now, and try and uncover a little bit deeper. It's also a learning process still, and I think that's
I agree.
my point of view there.
I think it's the most challenging part, actually, to really get to that sort of level, because when you have that and understand that, there will be some kind of budget in most of the cases.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where understanding the pain really comes in there. But also attaching that pain to monetary value.
Yeah.
I think that is the big thing and can often get lost, to understand the cost of inaction, but also understanding the return of their investment. And that's where we see, and probably Clara, you come against it a lot talking to CFOs, but we see kind of this shift. It's not enough to just answer the pains. It needs to be kind of, how does this look? How does it look in terms of return on investment in 6 months, in 1 year, in 2 years? And that kind of mindset.
100%.
Yeah, I think we have more questions too. I don't know if
I think like Dominic is answering a bit in the chat. If we look like on mid-market versus enterprise deals, to sort of keep the momentum going in the process, like, do you do anything different when you work towards like the enterprise deals than maybe a mid-market deal that can go a little bit faster than the enterprise one?
Yeah, so of course, when you're working with enterprise, usually that then involves an RFP. It usually involves procurement, legal, everything kind of just slows down slightly. But my advice here is to, again, understand early on what their internal processes are. So you can communicate what your processes are in the ideal world. That's very nice. But in essence, you need to understand how they buy software internally. You know, what their processes are, what your champion then has to do, who they have to bring in to the sales process. What's worked really well with us at Dream Data as well is also for you as a salesperson, bring other people from your own organization into calls. So if you are meeting a CFO, bring your CFO into the call as well. So you have someone at the same kind of level in hierarchy, and also level of understanding as well, which of course can help to kind of pick up the momentum, and also for your prospects to understand that you're serious about working together.
But I like that as well. And for me, I like to maybe sometimes, if it's a bigger dialogue, like introduce the customer success manager, implementation manager in some of the final calls, get them in there, bring the solution architect in, free resource consultation during the calls. I think that's super powerful. I do that, tend to do that even in the mid-market processes as well. It's good to just show different phases of the org that you're gonna business with.
And also when it comes to CS or your customer success team, they've then already met them. It makes it such a smoother kind of process. They've already met them in the sales process, and then, transition into kind of course, helping the client get onboarded. I think that's a super good tip, and what we do, but I think I could probably do more of as well.
Me too. And that was actually one of the final questions. Like, time is running so fast, but because the buying journey is not only like, of course, when we seal the deal, even if you want to celebrate and it's fun times. And this can, of course, be different how you operate. For us, it's like we only work with a new biz, so it's a cutover, introduced to customer success and implementation. Are you working somewhat the same at Dream Data? Like,
yeah, similar. So actually we changed kind of the way we work now. So once we close a new customer, we're actually on the onboarding call, the first initial call. We also have our onboarding documentation, where of course we send that prior to our customer success team, so they understand the business case, they understand what they're hoping to achieve with using our solution. And it's just an easier way to shift to another team. If you think about it, it's a logical thing, going back to this kind of community feeling of people knowing each other, getting the most information out of them. If you're speaking to a stranger, someone that you've met the first time, you're not going to say about all of your problems and all of the things that you struggle with in your role. But if you've met them over, let's face it, an enterprise deal being 6 months, 1 year even, that's a long process. That's a relationship building process that then if you suddenly just hand it over to your CS team without anything, they're meeting a stranger. I think a nicer experience for that client is, of course, to be on that call, to introduce your CS team, and then also keep the relationship. I'm not saying, of course, stepping on CS's toes. No way, Jose. But make sure that you still, reach out. If you're doing a customer event, be at that customer event. Also share some webinars, LinkedIn Lives with them, podcasts.
I like to go on lunch sometimes as well.
Lunch. Oh yeah. Who doesn't like a lovely lunch? I mean,
I'm such a relationship builder as well. I always feel a little bit like, oh, no, I'm not going to work with them anymore.
Yeah.
But I do see that's because I think companies are doing this differently. And I'm just thinking about from the buyer perspective, when you just have a kind of a raw cutover, like here's CS, off you go. Like, I think it's kind of a smooth transition that the sales rep actually are active in at least like the first interactions with the new team, so to speak.
I think that's really, really important. And I think, that's also, ever going kind of evolution as well, and learning how can we as sales work with post sales or CS teams in the best way. How can we make our processes seamless, and that is one way of doing it, is also just being on that initial call. I think that can help a great deal.
And to round off with the final question, so what would be sort of your absolute top 3 tips to enhance the buying journey from a buyer perspective, but also maybe steps that you can do to shorten the sales cycle?
Sorry,
I'm just, here you go.
I think I would break it down into 3 points, but also think about the buying journey. So I think kind of qualification. So I would say get using signal selling, understand each touch point on that customer journey before they come in and are interested in a demo. Once they have had a demo, make sure that you have this kind of mindset of really understanding their organization, how they buy, and who is buying, and what their role is, and what's important to them. And the third one was what we just went on, was make sure that it's a smooth process to CS. We are in kind of the world now where upselling, keeping your customers is even more important. And that's where kind of, companies can grow. So making sure that, relationship is smooth. Yeah. Hope that helped. You probably have a million different tips as well to go.
I think like that was pretty good summed up. And I think like my main thing is always like really dig deep down and find the real need. And I'm very transparent here. I still have processes where I feel like, okay, you haven't really gotten there, but you still managed to get the deal over the line, but it's taking longer. I feel like, okay, could I have shortened this initiative by digging a little bit deeper? I think that's one of like the keys. That is also like the biggest challenge that I see from my perspective there. I feel like I can still work on asking better questions, digging deeper. I think that's one of the like, take one thing.
I think so. I think so too. but it's very, very hard. We come back to kind of the psychological side of things. You can't always dig deep into that pain on the qualification call.
No.
People are not going to open up to you. It is an ongoing process. And also make sure that your buyers understand you, and also that you understand the buyer. So I always like to do kind of a small recap on each meeting, like, oh, last meeting we talked about this and this and this. Like you mentioned, Clara, has anything changed? Does this align with your expectations? And kind of understand, where it's evolving to.
Yeah. No, but I think this is what we covered slide, or just a few points, and dig into that. I love that. Yeah, I think we should round this up. I could sit and chat for 1 more hour, but it's also, I'm sure you also, last day of the month,
Yes, it's busy.
Together. But I was super happy to have you here today, and I'm guessing you also might go trick or treat with the kids.
Yes, you can see.
I'm gonna pick up my daughter a bit earlier, and go trick or treating too.
Exactly. It's gonna be so fun.
She was also a cat this morning. I had to do some makeup on her. No, but thank you so much, MC, for joining in today. And also thank you all in the audience, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.